Welcome to Acreate, the channel for anyone who likes to learn more about game development. This time we are going all in. You will learn to import sprites, create parents, and a lot more. Just hope you are ready to build a battle arena with tanks. Without further ado, let's start to make a game. Click on New, click on Drag and Drop. This will open a new screen in your browser to save the project. Click on Save and Continue. This time I'm not going to make the sprites from scratch. I already did that in the tutorial about Flappy Bird. No, this time I'm going to use the sprites from Kenny. Kenny provides a lot of free assets for starting developers. He also provides paid packages with a lot more sprites, but we are just using one of his free versions. You can also donate, of course, just to support. Because it's a small package, I don't really mind that we need to do some adjustments to make it work for our game. At this moment all the tanks are just showing vertical and we want to have the tank like rotate. So we need to make the rotation animation by ourselves. I will show you fastly in Illustrator how you can approach this issue. Don't forget, you can use any other program, as long as you don't use Paint, as Paint has the same problem as GameMaker of having limits of how you can rotate objects. Let's first start the documents and change the width by 1280 and height 768, which literally is 10 times 6, so 60 different tanks. So now I want to have the grid, so I'm going to view show grid. I already have the correct grid, but if you want to change it, you can go to preferences, guides and grid, and change this to 128. So we have exact blocks of where we want to have the image and the subdivisions by 2 to make it easier. So I'll open the zip folder from Kenny, and then I'm going to drag one of the tanks, and I want the red one in the field. So drag the tank to the center, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and continue this by placing 60 different tanks. I'm going to do that in speed. And now you have 60 red tanks. And now we're going to do some amazing maths. Oh well, I mean, I'm just going to divide 360 by 60, which is 6 degrees. And we will make use of the rotate tool. So object transform, rotate, type in 6, okay, next one, object transform, rotate 12, and continue. The last one should be transform, rotate 360. Well, if you like this tedious task of rotating the tank 60 times, I'm going to not disappoint you, because the same thing we're going to do with the green tank. And if you are not yet bored yet, we also need to do the same with the bullet. So now we have all the artwork of the game. I'm going to create a new sprite for the new tanks. Click on Edit Image. Click on Image, Import Strip Image. Find your PNG file from the red tanks. Now the screen convert frames will pop up and will give you a lot of settings to import the images. Change the frame width and frame height to 128, 128. Change the number of frames to 60 and change frames per row to 10. So we have 60 images, so 10 by 6. Click on Convert and ignore the warning. I noticed that I made a little mistake by creating the red tank. I think I was tired. I didn't start with the vertical image of the tank, but that doesn't matter that much because we have it on the back side. Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and I'm going to drag this one to the front. And now we have a beautiful cycle. The only thing left to do now is to rotate the image anti-clockwise, because that's the standard rotation settings for GameMaker, so that it faces to the right side. And we should be sure to delete the last vertical one, because we want 60 images. And close the sprite. Change the name and set the alignment to middle center. I noticed that the alignment is not exactly in the middle for the bullet, so I'm just pressing with my left button on the sign of the alignment and just dragging it to the point that I feel that is the center. And I repeat all steps with the next tank. It should look a bit like this: the middle center, the alignment, and having a tumbling 60 frames counting green tank to your command. Okay, so now we want to make the tanks. So go to Object, Create Object. Rename it as Object Tank 1 and give it the sprite of our first tank, the green tank. We will use the add event step end step to check every end frame where the tank is and which sprite needs to be called according. So set sprites to sprite tank green, and the frame will be the direction divided by 6, and then we set the animation speed to 0, so it will not change, only if we move to another direction. We'll also create an add event create and change the friction, set friction to 0.5, so that the way how the tank moves feels more realistic. We also want to make the tank moving in a natural way, so we want to use the A and the D keys to change the rotation and the W and the S keys to like move forward and move backward. So we create a key down and then the letter A and assign a variable to turn anti-clockwise. We change the direction and change the value to 6 and make it relative. We copy these events, copy events, spaces, count V, key down, letter D, and we change the 6 to -6. We will make use of the inbuilt speed function, so it is already in GameMaker itself. We use the letter W to create an if statement, and it's already there. If variable speed, and if the speed is less than 8, I'm going to make the speed faster. So set the variable speed to 1, press on relative and drag it in the if variable. In the same way I copied A, I also copy this event, copy event, right mouse button, paste event, key down and the letter S, and we will change it to the opposite. So then make if the speed is greater than value -8 and speed will be -1. And we can copy the tank by Ctrl D, double click on the new tank, change its name to tank red and change the image. And we will just change the events, so click a right mouse button on the event and change event, key down left, takes a bit of time, key down, change event, key down right. We will change the S to down and the W to up. Before we continue, I want to explain how parents work in GameMaker. So we have the green tank and we also have the red tank, and they have different stats. For example, the green tank uses WSD to move, it shoots with space, it has 100 health, has a friction of 0.5 and it can't drive into walls. And the red tank moves with the arrow keys, shoot with control, has 10 health as well, has a friction of 0.5 and can't drive into walls. As you can see, the tanks have some similarities. Like they can drive into walls, they have a friction of 0.5 and they have 100 health. The only big difference is like how they shoot and how they move. So what if we have like a base? Imagine that the base of the tanks is called the parent. The parent holds the information of 100 health, friction 0.5 and can drive into walls. We give the properties to the base and we make a connection between the base and tank green and the red tank. This is exactly the function of the parent. In this game, it doesn't really matter that much if we make different objects, but it is useful to use one object with different properties that other objects will use. As a developer, it's smart to use parents to give you less work and to structure your code. So as explained with the parents, we're going to delete the create function with the create set fraction. So on the red one and on the green tank. And we will create the object, create object, parent tank. We give it no sprites, add a create event to set the fraction, set fraction to 0.5. Add damage with the variable, that variable, damage. And we want to add another variable later on, but we can already do it. We click on extra variable and a new variable will be pop up in our list. Can shoot. So we want to use that later. Add the value 1. And we want to use the parent to draw the health bar of the tanks. GameMaker has an inbuilt function for draw health bar. So let's not draw instance health, but draw health bar. I do like the following settings. You can follow me or can try something else, but -20, -35, normally 20, and -30. We want the settings relative because we want for each tank that it will float above the tank. Now I will adjust the color. So basically the background and the max color are the most important. So red and green. And then the outline, I don't mind that much. Black is fine. And minus color is yellow. I already opened the parent function, but you can just open it by clicking on parent and add the children of the tank, so the green tank and the red tank. And if you click on one of the tanks, you will see that now they will have gray functions create. And if you click on it and you see the sign of the parent, you see which kind of functions it takes from the parent. As if it's working, click on the room. There's always a default room set by GameMaker, and we drag in both tanks. And press F5 or click on the run button to check. And I noticed that the red tank doesn't have the red tank as sprite, so we're going to fix it, but the movement is working. Check for the other tank as well. So I'm just going to click on the tank red to fix the issue. The issue is in end step because there is the sprite that will be generated is the green tank and we want the red tank to be generated. Okay, now we want to have two different sprites for wall objects. So click on sprites and import the crates from the candy folder. So crate metal first. Yes, and collation mask, automatic, and make it middle center. Give it a name that you can remember, or one, and create a new sprite. Create sprites, and import the wooden box from the candy folder. Create woods, and do the same. Click on yes, top left, middle center, and collation mask. Now we create a new object. So object create wall 1. Give it the sprite from the metal crate. So sprite metal crate. We don't give it any more function. The other wall we create will respawn. So we make a new object and give it an alarm. We rename it to object wall 2 and give it the wooden crate sprite. We will give it an alarm that we will just activate another object. We will check if the object is at place. So if object at place, and it is itself. So if object wall is on X star position and I star position. If it's not, then we want it to jump to start. So jump to start, and we drag add wall jump to start. We drag it in the if statement, and else we just want to keep on checking. So we will have the else statement that it will check the alarm. So once the alarm is activated, it will check itself. So alarm countdown. Let's say 5. We want in the object parent tank, we want to have a collision with the wall 1. We want to have a reverse of the direction. So it kind of bumps against the wall. And with the other collision of the object wall, we want to set the assign variable name speed minus speed. So it's very annoying to drive into. We also want to add a sprite for the background. So create sprite and import the background from the same folder. I just choose the send, so tell send 1, import, and just keep the settings. So we reopen the room, and as you see, because I feel it was too cluttered, I just deleted the rooms, the windows, but you can just reset the windows on current desktop. So if you just by mistake press the close button, you can restore it by the setting. I'm going to use the tile for the background. I'm going to click on the background and the sprites and press on background. And at this moment you will not see it, but if I just say horizontal tile and vertical tile, it will be tiled. And you can click on the middle mouse button to like change your view position, and if you press Ctrl and the middle mouse button to scroll, then you can zoom in and zoom out. These controls work with everything in GameMaker. So if, for example, I'm just going to object wall and I want to zoom in and zoom out, I can do it the same way. So it is a very useful trick to make it easier to move around and see where you're working. So now before I'm going to drag in the wall objects, I'm going to be sure that I'm with my mouse on the instance layer, because otherwise dragging objects will never work. I will also change the grid settings to fit the size of the walls, which were 56, 56. So it's a lot easier to place them. And I will uncheck snap. So drag object wall 1 in the field, hold the Alt, so then you will create a new one, and then you can keep on holding it and make the panel full with gray crates. And play around with placing them in the field. And don't forget to add the wooden box, otherwise there's nothing to be shot at. So now we want to see a bit of a score on the game, because otherwise we have no feedback. But before we can do that, we want to change the font, because the standard font in GameMaker is really ugly and it's very small. So I'm going to change the Arial font, that is the standard one, to 48. And I'm going to delete the letters because we don't need it. I just only want to have the numbers. So you can delete those to just save some space. In case you want to make very big games, this could be some way how you can make it less heavy for the builder. And click on regenerate. So now we have the font, we can create an object which we call object controller, which is quite common. I always use object controller. Control the UI. So we don't give it a sprite, and we add event create to set the variables. Set the variable score player 1, so score 1. Be aware to not use the inbuilt scores, but just create a new one. You can drag a new assigned variable in it, or you can just press on the plus button. Doesn't really matter that much. So score 2. Create a UI, so just go back at events, draw UI, and scroll to all the drawing functions. So here you have draw color, and then we just want to pick green because it's player 1, and set font, the one that we just created, and use draw value because we have a different score than the score setting. So here you have draw instant score, but we don't use it. We don't want any caption, but we want to show the score 1. And we want to use the X value 680 and the I value 10. Now for the other player, we want another color. So we want the red color. And we want to draw value. We don't need to reassign the font again because it just used the same font. I want to have a small break in between, so I'm just adding a small line and just a space, and then I change the value to score 2. The value I want to use is 750 and 10. You can tweak this by yourself, doesn't really matter. You can test it by just going back to your room and drag in the object controller in the room. And when I tested it, I just find out that I don't really like the font normally. I just want a bold Arial, so I'm just adding it and regenerate. So it's a bit more darker and bigger. Before I add the bullet, I want to have the sprite of the explosions because it's easier to implement. So just the sprite and go to edit image. And I love this from Kenny because he literally made it so easy to make animation for the explosion. We don't need to do anything for this. Just import the images and click on scale canvas. And now we have a beautiful animation. Just rename it to sprite explosion big. And do the same with the other explosion, which looks like this. I will just rename it small explosion. And we already have the animation fixed. The only thing we need to do is just make an object out of it. So object, big explosion, assign the big explosion sprite, and add the event animation end, which is under other animation end. And we'll just tell itself to destroy itself. So destroy instance destroy self. And we can just duplicate this explosion by Ctrl D, click on it, change the name, and change the sprite. And now we are going to add the bullets in the game. So create sprites, edit image, and add the tile set of the bullet. Import strip image. I created a long strip of bullets. I did it a bit different, but it is the same way. So number of frames, I just make 60 on one line and 60 on the row. Convert again. And in the same way we turn the tanks, we will just rotate it to make the bullets point to the right. Set the alignment in the middle and rename it. Oh, and I noticed by myself a stripe, so I'm going to fix that. It shouldn't be everywhere, so just only maybe on the first one and the last one. Let's continue by making a parent for the bullet. This will be the object bullet controller. We will not assign any sprites. And we will add a create event with an alarm so that it will destroy itself. So the alarm goes in 30 seconds is fine. And we will set the alarm to 0 and destroy instance destroy. So we will also want to create an explosion when it hits the wall. So when it hits the wall, we create the instance. Create instance small explosion. Object small explosion. We will just place it on a relative position, so where it hits, and then also as well destroy the instance. For the other wall, I just want to duplicate the event collision object wall. And this is just because I duplicated the object. It doesn't matter, this warning. I just want this wall to just move to a point that I can never see it. So 10000, it doesn't really matter. And now we are going to activate the alarm on the wooden wall. Here, before it destroys itself. And now I select the object wall 2. Remember, in wall 2, we made the function alarm jump to start. Go back to the bullet controller and change the set alarm countdown to 300. Please double check that the jump to point is directed to the wall and that the destroy instance is directed on the bullet. When a bullet hit another bullet, we also want that the bullet destroy itself. So we're just going to bullet controller itself. It doesn't matter because it's a different object. Create instance, create small explosion, and destroy itself. And don't forget to make the position relative. And like what we did with the tanks, we also want to have the end step event. So step, end step, and check where the direction is. So set sprite and then choose for the bullet, tracking the animation speed and change the speed to 0. So now we have everything for the bullet controller. So we want now to create the bullet. So object bullet 1 and object bullet 2. So now we have everything for the bullet. So we just create a new bullet, object bullet, and already assign new parent object. We assign the parent bullet controller. The only thing we need to add is a collision with tank 2. I'm going to assign a variable, so the variable damage that we take from the other, and we change the value 10 and make it relative, and we create the instance. Sorry, that is not create instance. Create instance. Yeah, the new creates looks very alike, so sometimes a bit of a puzzle. Just click on small explosion, make it relative, and destroy instance. There it is. Just assign the bullet sprites on it, and we can just duplicate it to object bullets 2. The only thing we need to do is just click on the object bullet 2 and change the object tank red to change events to collision with the object tank green. Let's go back to the bullet controller to check everything, because in the end step I forgot to change the direction divide by 6. And it is good to double check if the parent is working, so check if the children are bullet 1 and bullet 2. So let's activate shooting. We click on the first tank, add the event key down space, and we want to double check if the player is allowed to shoot. So variable can shoot, and it's in the tank already, is less than 0. We don't do anything, so exit event. But if we can shoot, then we just want to create the bullet and need to be aware that tank 1 has bullet 1 and the position will be relative. And as we're pointing at a direction, we want that the bullet is also pointing at the same direction. So we want to choose bullet 1 and we want to say the direction. And we want to give it the same value as the tank. So object tank 1, point direction, which is a standard variable in GameMaker. And we will set it to relative. And we want to add another variable, the variable speed, to value 16, which is also an inbuilt variable. And we want to assign a new variable, but not a set instance variable. So I'm dragging the assign variable, and I'm going to use the can shoot variable that we already assigned, and we will set the value to -10. I'm going to select all of the new functions with holding the shift and pressing the left mouse button, dragging down and Ctrl+C, and click on object tank red, add events, key down, and we set control. So we just use Ctrl for shooting, press on the fields, and use Ctrl+V. And now we have all the functions here as well. Just be sure to change object bullet 1 to object bullet 2 and change the object tank 2 direction. And if you haven't done yet, just change the red tank to the name object tank 2. This makes your lives a lot more easier. Basically, we only can shoot once now with this code, so we want to add step event so that every time there is a step, we can shoot again. At the value 1 to relative. Now we want to check if the tank is dead or alive, so we check if the damage is greater than 100. It means that the player lost. So in that case, we are going to set the score from the other player. So in this case, it should be score 1. Score 1. Value 1. And we need to assign the score from the controller. So click on object and object controller and set it to relative. Add a create instance big explosion on the relative position and destroy itself. So you're going to copy all of the functions. But to be able to do that, we need to drag up and click on top. So Control A, so it takes all the function, Control C, and go to Object Tank 1, Add Event, Step, and Control V. Assign the score to 2. At this moment, the game is already finished when one of the tanks is out of the game. So we don't want that. Like, we can use the big explosion to restart the room. The only thing is with it, then everything will be restarted. And we still want to count some score. So we just click on the object controller and click on persistent. This means that the object will stay in the game and it keeps on counting. Press F5 to check what is all in the game. Well done! The tanks have their own UI, score and behavior, and we can already play this amazing game. Though, in the following up tutorial, we will create even more great stuff like pickups and different weapons and will enhance the map. So just subscribe to miss none of that.